We announce it onto the microphone, say the date. Today is the first day of Rosh Chodesh Tamuz Dayan Raskin. This is a special guest shir from Dayan Raskin from London, giving us a shir on Hilchos Tfilah and Krias HaTorah.
One of my particular areas of interest is Shabbos, which large shluchim have in their houses. And this is a field which I felt has not been adequately addressed in the general halacha world. And people don't understand the concept that you should have someone who is a shomer Torah mitzvahs, dealing with people on a day-to-day basis who are not shomer Torah mitzvahs. It's a new phenomenon. If, let's say, until a half a century ago, it probably was almost unheard of that someone, it was two worlds. There was the frum world and there was the non-frum world, which existed then also. But there should be this ongoing contact between the two, the interest. That is something which is new. And I published a sefer last year, which is, I'll show you a copy of. I don't make any money on promotions. Just showing this is the sefer is called Netivim B'Sdei HaShlichut, paths in the field of shlichus. So this shlichus, and you need to have a lot of energy and devotion. But there's just one little path within that field, which is sometimes you have halacha shrines. And so that's what was one of the main themes of this sefer. I'm working on the following volume. And that's why I'm sitting with you, to go through one chapter of the forthcoming sefer. It's going to take some time. I'm not talking about the shir, I'm talking about the sefer. But okay. Because we're talking about a Chabad community, so some of the things may not necessarily be questions on shlichus nature, but of interest to Chabad. So I'm going to work backwards for the moment from the Haftarah. When it comes to the Haftarah, so you read the Haftarah standing at the bimah. Which position does the one reading the Haftarah take? Does he stand in the middle of the bimah, or does he stand at the side of the bimah? The general minhag in Chabad, as far as I remember, has been that the one who says that he reads the Haftarah stands to the side. Usually, as you stand by the bimah, read to the right side of the bimah. If you'd be facing the Aron Kodesh. But Rebbe would stand in the middle of the bimah, facing straight ahead, facing the Aron Kodesh. So someone asked me about that recently. I don't have any solid sources, just a hunch, a theory, that when you stand in the middle, if the one holding the Sefer Torah is directly behind you, it would be disrespectful for your ear to be facing directly the Sefer Torah. In 770, the layout is that behind, at the back of the bimah, there are two chairs on either side, and in the middle is the staircase, the passage. Therefore, if you stand in the middle, you don't have your back to the Sefer Torah. I'm going to explain why in the general shtibelach, in the general shuls, where it's just a chair put there and the fellow held the Sefer Torah just behind bimah, so it was uncomfortable, perhaps like inappropriate to stand there reading the Haftarah with your back to the Sefer Torah, so the minhag became to stand by the side, whereas in 770 it was a different layout that it would stand in the middle. Anyone has any more about that? I'm curious. There's one spelling in the Sefer Torah where our minhag, our tradition is different to the Welt, to the general Ashkenazi world. There's one word, Parshas Kiseitze, and lo yoveh t'suah dako, Bekal Hashem. A person who's got a certain genetic problem, that's the right word, something related to that, may not be married into the Jewish community. The word dako can be spelled either with a hey or it can be spelled with an aleph. And the general Ashkenazi custom is to write the word daka with a hey. And you're familiar in Hayom Yom, around then, it's around Elul time, it says that there's that Masorah from the Alter Rebbe to write daka with an aleph. And he says that he writes there, I think the Rebbe Rashab had been in a place called Worms, which is the birthplace of Rashi. Is that right? Well, Rashi's yeshiva was in Worms. Rashi was born in Twa. There they saw the Sefer Torah written daka with an aleph, and then there's various number of sources that daka should be written with an aleph. Our question is, what happens if you come to a shul where there's not a Chabad shul, and therefore the Sefer Torah presumably has got daka written with a hey? Are you allowed to be oiler? Are you allowed to have an aliyah such as Sefer Torah? Now, recently ArtScroll published a book by someone, it's called In the Paths of the Prophets, something like that, by someone called Reisman, fellow in Borough Park, who gives shiurim and Motzei Shabbos for hundreds and hundreds of people. And he took the slant the other way around. Can a non-Chabadnik have an aliyah and a Chabad Sefer Torah? I'm not going to give him any compliments for the way he wrote that article. I'm surprised it passed through any menschliche editor. But be that as it may, I'm dealing with the question at the halacha level. Can you have an aliyah in a Sefer Torah which, according to you, may actually be misspelled? And here there's a very interesting discussion of the Tzemach Tzedek. What is the pshat if a Sefer Torah has got a letter missing, so the Sefer Torah is possible? Does that mean you're not allowed to read the Sefer Torah for Krias HaTorah? Or possibly that is a din in the mitzvah of Ksiva Sefer Torah. Just like I have a mitzvah to have a mezuzah on my door, and if that mezuzah has got one letter wrong, misspelled, cracked in the middle, whatever, I do not fulfill the mitzvah of mezuzah. So too with tefillin. So too, there's a mitzvah incumbent upon each one of us to write a Sefer Torah. All right, nowadays we fulfill it collectively, however we do it. But there is this mitzvah of having a Sefer Torah of yours. If that Sefer Torah is missing a letter, so then, or rather misspelled, so then you are forfeiting your mitzvah of Ksiva Sefer Torah. Who says that the mitzvah of reading Krias HaTorah is inseparable from the mitzvah of owning a Sefer Torah? These could be two separate things. Actually, in the times of the Gemara, it was common to teach Chumash with scrolls. A scroll of Vayikra, a scroll of Bamidbar. Those scrolls were known as Chumshim. Chumash, a fifth of the Torah. Gemara asks, why can you not read the Torah from a Chumash, in other words, a scroll of Bamidbar? So the Gemara answers, it's not respectful for the tzibur, it's not respectful for the congregation. Look at that. It's 80% is missing, yeah? It's just one sefer out of 5. And what is the drawback? Why can you not use that for Krias HaTorah? Ein kavod tzibur. Which tells you a very interesting thing here. That the din of Krias HaTorah does not need a kosher Sefer Torah. It's a separate din. Okay. We're not going to start changing the halacha. Of course, so this is actually a machlokas aposkim, Rambam and others. The Rambam in a Shuvah of the Rambam, where he takes this position that a Sefer Torah, even if there is something lacking, it disqualifies the Sefer Torah for the mitzvah of possessing a Torah. It does not disqualify it for Krias HaTorah. We'll use that. We don't pass it like this in the first instance, but in a b'diavad situation, in a push comes to shove situation, you certainly have what to rely upon to make a bracha on a Sefer Torah, even though it may not be spelled according to your tradition. That wasn't the conclusion of Rabbi Reisman. He left it as a question. Right. Another another simple question, not necessarily a shlichus question, but it's more likely. You have a small shul, you are the rabbi, let's say. You are the rabbi, chazan shamish, bottle washer, cleaner upper after kiddushim, etc. Yeah? It's a one-man show. You have Baruch Hashem, you got bar mitzvah boy. How do you call up your son? Yamoid, Beni Ben, Beni Ben Ani. Oh, Beni Ben Ani. Well, that's how I know where the word Beni comes from. Ben Ani. Sure. More seriously, how do you call up your father? Do you call up your father with his name? Generally, it's not right to address your father with his name. What is not so well known is that to a father-in-law, which Be'ez Hashem in the near future, the next few years, will be relevant to you guys. A father-in-law, there's a mitzvah with the Rabbanon of Kibbud Av. I don't know whether it spells out Ashvigers, but there is a din that with Rabbanon there's a duty of respect to a father-in-law. I'm spelling this out because sometimes I hear people addressing their fathers-in-law by first name. And the fathers-in-law don't realize, perhaps, that it's inappropriate. So they are say, it's okay, call me Henry, whatever baby. But there's the halacha of Kibbud Av with Rabbanon to a father-in-law. So your shver, or your father, how do you call him up if you're the Gabe? For that matter, how do you call up your brother? Yamoid, Ochi, without his father's name? How crucial is it to use the full name of Pliny ben Pliny, so-and-so, the son of so-and-so? There was a time that the reform element in Poland, there was a town called Częstochow. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. It doesn't matter if I'm not. And there was a innovative element there. They were trying to introduce that instead of having this whole hassle of the gabbai saying the name of the father's name, it might be a more balabatish way, giving out little papers before, and it says Rishon Sheni Yamod Sheni Yamod Shlishi, and then and there was a discussion by the Rabbanim at the time that no, it's very important to actually call up with the name. And there's one of them who says that even a son for the father, if he is the Gabe, he shouldn't forgo his Gaboes. He should call up his father with the name, Pliny ben Pliny. We did not see that. By the Rebbe, they did not call up the Rebbe by his name. In other words, according to this one who says you're meant to say the name, despite the idea of Kavod of it. So the same thing would be for Rebbe, you'd have to call up with the name. By the Rebbe, they were not like this. They would just, that was the every Monday and Thursday and Shabbos. So they did not call up the Rebbe by his name. So it looks like perhaps we are not so fussy about Mamesh using the name. The only time they called up the Rebbe with his name was on Simchas Torah, because then they called up the Rebbe together with the Frierdiker Rebbe. Like when Simchas Torah, you call up more than one person at a time. So they would call up I don't remember which was the order. Frierdiker Rebbe's name with Rebbe Rashab's name, and the Rebbe's name with his father's name. That was the only time that they would call up the Rebbe with his name. Huh? They didn't call up with the name? I remember they called up with the name. What didn't? Huh? Could be a different year. Upon him, I just see here a number of problems which arise here. And therefore, my simple advice would be in such a situation that it would be advisable that you as a Gabe should appoint another one of your community. You have 10 people in the room. One of them should be nominated as the second Gabe. And whenever you are going to encounter a relative situation. So you ask the other Gabba to make that Ya'amoid, then your problem is solved. I don't really have a clear answer. I just see different ways about it, and that's the simplest answer. Get someone else to. Yes, I'm listening.
Let me ask, when I call English is Torah, do you say their name and father's name? Is that a problem?
I didn't understand what you said.
Anytime you call anybody the Torah, they ask you your name.
Yes.
My name is from.
Yes, you're allowed. You can say your father's name.
Is that no problem at all?
No, you can tell them. That's of necessity, and that's okay.
Also, with deep question and answers to the end, so you get the entire Haggadah. People have questions, write them down, and wait with them about 1:30 or 1:20, at 1:20 or 2:20. I'll have some questions and answers.
Okay. Now, in the absence of a kohen, so normally the way it's written in the Gemara is nispardo hachavilo. The package has become undone. The package would normally be the sequence Kohen Levi Israel. But in the absence of a Kohen, there is no binding sequence. Despite that, there's an incident with the Alter Rebbe where the Gabe this is quoted in the name of about the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe gave a special bracha to the Gabe who called a Levi in the absence of a Kohen. In other words, that the first aliyah was given to a Levi. There's a couple of such sources in Chabad tradition of giving aliyah to, if there's no pressure, but just there's no pressure, so that one would give a Levi the first aliyah. Now, if you look in the Poskim, you see like this, that when there's no Kohen, then if the Levi is of equal status to any of the Israelim in the room, then you should give the Levi first. In other words, as you say in English, all things being equal. But if there is someone more prominent, more choshev than the Levi, then you should give the aliyah to the choshev person. Now, this was in the presence of the Alter Rebbe, and so I presume the Alter Rebbe was choshever than that Levi, and yet he thanked the Gabe and gave him a bracha for Arichas Yomim for giving the aliyah to the Levi. And a similar story happened with the Rebbe Rashab. Again, he was there, and the aliyah was given to the Levi rather than to the Adam Choshev. Just to support this, by Chassidim we don't really have such a thing of making voting who's more Choshev. There is a story, I remember once by Fabrengen, the Rebbe mentioned someone known as the Radatz. Radatz, his name was Reb David Tzvi Chaim. He was a son of Reb Peretz Chaim. The Rebbe said that in the house they used to refer to him as David Hirschel. David Tzvi, Tzvi Hirsch. Tzvi is a deer, so Tzvi Hirsch. We used to call him in the house David Hirschel. You could ask the Rebbe, kind of asking on himself, how come that we should refer to him? He was a tremendous genius, a very righteous fellow. How come that they would be using, without any titles, just David Hirsch? And the Rebbe said that possibly the explanation for this is that by Chassidim they see the Rebbe before their eyes the whole time. Therefore, there is a concept of ein chelkin kavod letalmid b'makim harav. And one does not allocate respect to a disciple in the presence of his master. Therefore, since whenever they saw David Hirschel, they saw also the Rebbe Shmos Seidin, so therefore they can't give him kavod. I know sometimes we work on that very hard, not to give kavod. But that's the Rebbe explained why by Chassidim there wasn't this idea of laying out more or less, because of the awareness of the Rebbe's presence. Okay. I had someone ask me before Shavuos about making Krias HaTorah for the children to hear Aseres HaDibros. Is it justified to take out the Sefer Torah just for one aliyah? I told him I don't think that would be right. once you start introducing your own chidushim, we don't know where that leads to. We have a traditional format of Krias HaTorah, and that is on a Yom Tov you have 5 aliyahs, you have then a maftir, and then you have a haftorah, and if you do that in the afternoon, no. But to start doing see, the Rebbe never said to make a separate minyan for Krias HaTorah, for Aseres HaDibros for kids. The Rebbe says bring the kids to shul for Aseres HaDibros. Yeah? But to start creating new things, that's where we have to be very careful when we start doing such things. So the fact that we sometimes do a Krias HaTorah of the morning in the afternoon, that is okay. Krias HaTorah is a standalone. Does that sound English? A standalone? Yeah? Like in computer world, yeah? It's a, within the davening, Krias HaTorah is a standalone. Where does this manifest? If you have 10 people in the room, and you've started davening, and one of them walks out, so you're allowed to finish the unit which you are in the middle of. So if someone walks out, you've started Chazaras HaShatz, the repetition of the Chazan. Someone walks out, you can finish off the whole of Chazaras HaShatz. You cannot do Birchas Koyanim, as in Eretz Yisrael they do every day or every Shabbos. You cannot do Birchas Koyanim. That's considered a separate item. It's a standalone within the Shemona Esrei. You can say the Kaddish after Shemona Esrei, and if it's on a weekday, you can also say the Kaddish after Uvolat Zion, where you say Tiskabel Tzilois Novosai. May the prayers referred to the Shemona Esrei be accepted. So you can do all of that with 7 people in the room, because you started with 10. But you cannot do, in that instance, you cannot do Krias HaTorah. Pardon? Birchas Koyanim you would not be able to. That yes, Birchas Koyanim, they're like we do every day. Shachris that you can do, but the Birchas Koyanim, which is done with a bracha, the Koyanim standing here, that whole thing cannot be done without the 10 people present at that time. So there you see in that halacha how Krias HaTorah is a standalone. And there it is perhaps a lechumra. But now we're going to use the same thing in lekula, that even though you did not do Krias HaTorah in its normal slot, which is during the Shachris, you can do Krias HaTorah at a later point, even in the afternoon. Okay. The question is actually, when does the border change? Because on the Shabbos, the afternoon you have a Krias HaTorah of Mincha. So what's the justification of doing a morning Krias HaTorah in the afternoon when it's already come the time of the Mincha reading? That's a separate issue, but in any case we're dealing with Yom Tov. Alright, so back to this point. To make a separate Krias HaTorah just for the Aseres HaDibros would not be advisable, but to do if you have 6 people who haven't heard Krias HaTorah, and you'll get them together with another 4 people and make a minyan on Shavuos afternoon for Aseres HaDibros, that's okay. There's a similar issue about Parshas Zocher. The Shabbos before Purim, we read Parshas Zocher, and in the Litvish community, they are very worried about the women who didn't come to shul in the morning. What about them hearing Krias HaTorah of Parshas Zocher? And it's common in the Litvish world to make a reading of Parshas Zocher in the afternoon for the ladies. That, as far as I've seen, in the Chabad community, in the Chassidish community, is not done. We don't make a separate reading of Parshas Zocher for the Noshim, for whatever the reason may be. But this is the thing which is discussed in Poskim. So when I was looking into the question of making a Aseres HaDibros reading, so I was trying to compare to the Parshas Zocher reading. Now, if you will ask, do you find anywhere that there's a Krias HaTorah of a single parsha, a single aliyah, for a precedent for this? So there is a precedent. And there is the Kohen Gadol's reading on Yom Kippur, and the Melach's reading on Hakhel. And there would be a bracha lefoneo and a bracha lachareho, actually more than the several brachas. So there is a precedent for the idea of a reading of a single person, a single aliyah. But Lamaisa, Parshas Zocher, I have not seen in Chabad to make a separate minyan for that. And Aseres HaDibros, again, You might say it's my British conservative tendency, but I would go against introducing new minhagim which we do not have solid foundations for. Very common shaila. A person has an aliyah and he says, Baruch Hu, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hu, Baruch Atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah hasenos. What do you do if you said the after bracha before? Very, very common question, yeah? That's very useful, especially in a Beis Chabad situation. You have a card with the right brachas there, and if it has transliteration, even better, because not everybody is that confident. But if someone did read the after bracha before, so most poskim say, once he's done it, if he's in the middle of the bracha, you should correct him and go back to Asher Bochar Banu. If he's already rattled off till the second Baruch Atah Hashem, so then you cannot correct him. It's okay. He'll say the before bracha afterwards. In other words, let him. He said Baruch Atah Torah. After the aliyah, he'll say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher bochar banu mikol ha'amim. So although the correct sequence is the way it appears in the Siddur, bochar banu is before, nasan is afterwards, b'diavad, which means well after the fact, he's already said the wrong bracha first. So you just switch things around. Again, a small community, this can happen. If you have 10 people, but you don't have a Sefer Torah, what do you do for Krias HaTorah? You don't have a Sefer Torah. So the way it's written in Shulchan Aruch is that you should take a chumash and you read, or possibly even a Sefer Torah, and you do not use, I said there's no Sefer Torah, right? You have 10 people, no Sefer Torah. Now you have a similar situation where you have a Sefer Torah and not 10 people. We'll deal with that soon. Meanwhile, you have 10 people and no Sefer Torah, so then you can read, and you should read from a chumash. Obviously, no brachas, and you don't do kaliyas, just that you'd go through the reading of the Torah. The other way around, when you do have a Sefer Torah and you don't have 10 people, is it okay to take out the Sefer Torah and do a reading? Again, no brachas, obviously. It would be acceptable to take out the Sefer Torah, do a reading of the Sefer Torah. No 7 people, because it would be too similar to Krias HaTorah. You want to show that it's not it. Some people told me actually in their Beis Chabad, when they do not have 10 people, so they sit around a table and they go through the parsha and they have time to discuss it, and actually they find it actually quite rewarding that there is the opportunity to discuss the parsha. So that both ways are acceptable. One should stop for Krias HaTorah in one form or another. One of my concerns in this topic is there's an expression shelo yetzu b'pachei nefesh. People should not leave the shul and feel disheartened and frustrated. If they made the effort to come to shul, they should not go away from shul feeling it was a failure today. Therefore, to give them the experience of a Krias HaTorah, one form or another, they should go away. Yes, it was. We did achieve something. It's not because the other fellow slept in and therefore we had done it. It is very important not to discourage them, that they should, next time you call them for the minyan, they'll say, well, Rabbi, we don't seem to get our act together. In any case, when you do, then you can get back to me. How do you call up someone whose father is not Jewish? Let's say his name is Chaim. So preferable would be Ben Avraham. That if sometimes there may be a situation where it's awkward to do that, the pressure, maybe sometimes, it would be acceptable to call up with the mother's father's name, if that is known. So if the Zayda's name was David, one would call him Avraham ben David. Now, this basing upon, obviously, with sources, but there is a situation of a person whose father became an apicurus. His father became a heretic, and so he does not right to call him up with his father's name. So what do you do then? So they say you should call up with the grandfather's name, not the maternal, the paternal grandfather. And they give the example, Ya'amoid Avi Yosef ben Yitzchor. And that's relevant to this week's parsha, or last week's parsha in Eretz Yisrael, where Korach, in the beginning of the parsha, talks about the lineage of Korach was ben Yitzchor. And Rashi mentions there how later in Divrei Hayomim it mentions that he had a son. I think Rashi mentioned he had a son called Avi Yosef. So anyway, he had a son called Avi Yosef, and so the Mefarshim say Ya'amoid Avi Yosef ben Yitzchor. And now that is important to clarify. You might have thought you should say Avi Yosef ben Yitzchor, which might have been more factually correct. But that's why I'm emphasizing that Pasuk say you can it's okay to call him Ben, his grandfather, and to use that example. So that is written about with the father's apicurus. It's plausible that if it's awkward to call up the one who's got a Goyish father with his Ben Avram, so it would be acceptable to use the maternal grandfather's name. Now, what about someone who does not have a Jewish name? Is it okay to call him Yamoid Robin Ben Henry? Or no? Now, as far as I know, I've never heard of such a thing being done, although when it comes to a ksuba, when it's on the shvissen, when one has to write a get, one certainly does write in a get the non-Jewish names. And even if it's called several names, nicknames, they are all spelt out in a get. And there's a whole study in Sfarim of Halacha about get. How do you spell those names which have no easy spelling in Hebrew, like Matthew Hebblethwaite, something like that. How are you going to write that in Hebrew? And so there's a whole department in Halacha how to spell foreign names in a get. But although that is done for gittin, and sometimes in a ksuba, but not in a aliyah l'Torah. I've never heard someone being called up by Mishaberach. I don't know, you can't by Mishaberach, you may not necessarily have the chance to start changing names. But for a aliyah l'Torah, as far as I know, one would make a point of giving them a name. And that's another procedure. Someone actually came to me recently, just last week. But he didn't have a name, didn't have a Jewish name. So they gave him a name, David. Then he made a bit of research, and it looks like his mother's father was Mordechai. Somehow he's got some kind of he's got some impression that he was named after that grandfather. So what does he do now? So call yourself David Mordechai, Mordechai David. Once you are allowed to adopt a new name, that's fine. If you have a historic name, so you don't have to ditch that one. It's fine. It's okay. So you can have both names. So I've never seen for Krias HaTorah using a non-Jewish name. Someone would make that effort and that decision that a person should have a Jewish name before they are given aliyah l'Torah. What do you do about this learning disabled person? Is that the word?
Learning or learning?
Learning disabled, retarded, slow. Can you give them an aliyah? In other words, you know that there's a status of chayre shoyte v'koton. The person who is an imbecile, or is deaf, a deaf mute, or a minor, they cannot have an aliyah, generally. Yeah. So they're not considered adults. So how do you decide whether this person? What is the guidelines? There are people who are partially disabled. How do you handle that? what are the criteria here? So there's a famous story of the Tzemach Tzedek. I'm sure you've heard this story about a woman who her husband had died. And she had no children from this husband. And the husband had a brother. So if there's a living brother and she's a widow, so there's a duty of Yibum that the brother has to marry the widow. If he doesn't want to, so then there is a procedure called Chalitza, where she takes off his shoe and she spits and she says, so shall be done to the one who does not perpetuate his brother's memory, his brother's name, and after that she is free to remarry. Until that point she may not remarry. So she is now stuck. Because this brother-in-law of hers was a crazy boy. He was totally wild. So they didn't know what to do. To get this fellow, is he considered mature and capable to give chalitza? And so she went through many rabbonim, prominent rabbonim in Russia, Lithuania, whatever, asking them for a heter, that how she's going to get out of this situation. Her husband is dead. Her brother-in-law, she was schlepping him around with her, and they could see exactly what we're talking about. In case there was to have any doubts, she brought him with. So, how do you get out of this? There's no other brothers. And so she went to, I've forgotten who it was, one of the very prominent pastor at the time, and he said, I can't give you a heter, I can't give you a thing. And she would go to each row, and they would write up a whole thing, the reasons for and the reasons against. And after all this, I feel incapable of coming to resolve this. And therefore, I'm going to defer this to someone who more learned and more knowledgeable than myself. So she was piling up these files of Kilpulim of their own. And this Rav said, go to Lubavitch. There's the Tzemach Tzedek. He wasn't known as the Tzemach Tzedek then, you know that. Tzemach Tzedek's Sforim were published after its passing. I'm going to digress for a moment. You're going to like this one. The Rebbe once said, Tzemach, why was he called Tzemach? Why did he call it Tzemach Tzedek? Because Tzemach is the name of Moshiach. When was the Tzemach Tzedek known as the Tzemach Tzedek? When was it printed? He passed away. Right. So she comes to Lubavitch, that's Tzemach Tzedek, and she couldn't go in, whatever. The point she did go into the Tzemach Tzedek with this, and the Rav who sent her to the Tzemach Tzedek told her, if he does give you a heter, ask him to write down, I'd like to see the basis of his ruling. So she comes into the Tzemach Tzedek with his boy, and he's jumping up and down, he's like, acting crazy. And the Tzemach Tzedek says, calls him over. He says, what's your name? And what's your name? So he says his name? The Rebbe says his name. Oh, my name is Yitzchak. What do you want from me? So he says, I'm giving you 10 kopkas, whatever, 20 kopkas. I want you to go to the market. I want you to buy tobacco for so much, and matches for so much, and paper perhaps, whatever. It was 3 things he asked him. And bring me the change. Bring me the stuff and give me the change. Can you do that? What do you think? I'm stupid? Of course I can. And he jumps out the window and rushes off to the market, and brings it 15 minutes later. He's back. Here's the cigarette. Here's the tobacco. Here's the and then he rushes out. He puts out the change. And so the Tzemach Tzedek says to the woman, fine, Chalitza can go ahead. And the dinner of a Chalitza is that there has to be a designated room. On the day before the Chalitza, you have to designate a room. This is going to be the site where the Chalitza is going to take place. It says in the Torah, "V'koru loi beis chalutz hanual." So whenever Chalitza is done, so the day before, one has to go through a formality of designating the room. This is going to be the Beis HaChalitza. And so the Rebbe Tzemach said to whoever was responsible there, who carried out, designate a place where we're going to make the Chalitza, and tomorrow we'll make the Chalitza. And so then the lady was delighted, and she asked the Rebbe, could the Rebbe write down the sources? So I said, no, okay. And he writes down like a two-liner. She was expecting like all the other Rabbanim in pages and pages and pages. And it was just mamish 2 lines, a quote from Yerushalmi. What's the expression there? A shoiter hayideya lefaret bruta ein a shoiter. A shoiter who knows, an imbecile, who knows how to give change for money or something like that, is not considered a shoiter, not considered an imbecile. And so that was his basis. And then she went to Had Chalitza, went back to this other row, the Kosek, where it's originally. And he looks at this, and he says, it's a Yerushalmi. It's a Yerushalmi. He says, I've seen this Yerushalmi many, many times. But only if you learn Torah Lishmo, to realize, to associate, and to be able to translate that this is what it means. Well-known story, which is published in a number of sources. So let's come back to our question. A learning disabled person, at what stage do you say that they are still, knowledgeable enough? They are mature enough. At what stage do you say, no, they are so deranged that they cannot be part of a minyan, cannot have a Torah? So you see here, there can be really, the threshold is pretty low. They don't have to be very capable. Etc. Some more recent poskim say that if this, I don't know exactly the correct terminology, there's learning disabled, there is, crazy, there's different types. So some of them are quiet and slow, some of them are very lebendig and freilich, different types. So the Tzedek situation was more a rowdy type. Sometimes you just very, Islam, you shouldn't know about this, but unfortunately these things exist. So some of the poskim give the definition that if they have the level of intelligence of a child of 6, approximately, so then they are considered an adult. So we understand a child of 6, there are certain things which will be childish. You wouldn't expect a child of 8 to indulge in such fantasies perhaps as a child of 6. But if he's got the maturity of a child of 6, then you can give him an aliyah, etc. Here's another interesting question, which unfortunately we have in our community in London. A person who does not speak clearly, does not articulate to the degree that you can't understand what he's saying. Now, I'm not talking about appointing him as a chazan. Can you give him an aliyah Torah? You can't say a bracha. That's what it sounds like. At what stage you say, well, that's all right. It doesn't have to speak so clearly. The Barditchever once said that a mother understands. People talking about people who make mistakes in learning, they don't say the words correctly. So the Barditchever said that the mother understands that when a baby is babbling and not speaking clearly, the mother understands what she says. Does that have bearing la'alocha? At what stage do you say that this person is articulate enough to give them an aliyah Torah? Or do you say no, that this is, unfortunately, we're not there yet? So they say like this: if even people who are not familiar with him can listen and understand with difficulty, but they can make out what they're saying, then that person is considered articulate as a person who's able to speak and give an aliyah, etc. If they are so unclear that only those who are very close with them on a day-to-day basis are able to decipher what they're saying, then unfortunately they would not be counted for as they are able to speak, and I guess you wouldn't be able to give them the Torah. Of course, I'm giving you very broad guidelines. If such a thing would be necessary, the Maisa, of course, you'll discuss with someone who's knowledgeable. You look into yourself, Bez Hashem, but just giving you bits and pieces come up on a regular basis. Can you give an aliyah to someone who unfortunately is blind? So the answer is that the minhag is to give an aliyah to a blind person. The person cannot read the aliyah. So the principle here is that the bracha is actually said not upon the person's own reading, but upon the Balkoira's reading. So there is an act. I've said a bracha, and in the morning we've all said brachas. Then we say the same bracha again when we have an aliyah Torah. Why are we saying the same bracha again? When there is a public reading, standing up in front of a tzibur, in front of a congregation, and reading from the Torah, that is a special higher profile, and for that event we say a separate bracha of Asher Bocha Bonu, etc. Who is actually doing that higher profile? You know, some communities, the way it used to be, but in the Taimonim, I believe it's still done, that the person has an aliyah, reads in his own parsha. But most of us, just not to embarrass most of us, we have Balkoire, and he saves us, and he just does the public reading. And so the bracha may be understood as not so much for me standing there, but more my bracha is for the chazan who's saying it aloud. If that's the case, so the blind person can also say a bracha on the reading of the Balkoire. It is common, and this seems to be ground for this halacha, that even if a person doesn't, and this probably follows on from the previous point, a person who does not understand a word of Hebrew, he cannot read, can you give him an aliyah? You bring him the transliterated thing, and make sure you tell him before to switch off his cell phone. It shouldn't ring in the middle of the aliyah while he's looking around, and he has an aliyah. What's he making the bracha on? He's making a bracha on the Balkoira's reading. So that seems to be acceptable. Just about the cell phones. Interesting question. Is it, I don't know the answer, is it correct to put up a notice in a shul, please switch off your cell phones before entering the sanctuary? Not Shabbos. Of course, you put up the notice before Shabbos. But you're asking people, of course it's very embarrassing when someone will pull out a cell phone in the middle of the davening. But to ask them to switch it off is that you are asking them to do something which you're not allowed to do on Shabbos. If you'd be just switching off the cell phone, but when you switch off the cell phone, you have to switch it on. Yeah, it's in how you say in sleeping mode, or silent. Or it's the screen goes off. Yeah, in order to switch it off, you have to switch it on. So to take something which is off and make it off completely be less of a malacha. But it doesn't necessarily involve to switch the light on. And to switch a light on is the malacha. So you can't ask a person to do a malacha, even though it is to save from embarrassment. Can you give an aliyah Torah for someone who never had a bris? Unfortunately, quite a common thing, especially people who come out of Russia. There are places where they are poskim who maintain that you should not give an aliyah to a person who has not had a bris. Not all poskim agree with that, and some of them allow giving an aliyah. Now, I just want to give you an interesting slant on this. We have a duty of Krias HaTorah, which means we have a duty if we see someone, including ourselves, doing something wrong, to rectify that. To rectify by speaking to them, persuading them, and to push them to rectify the situation. That is mitzvah Krias HaTorah. If a person can be pushed to rectify the non-circumcised situation by the not giving an aliyah, so you have a duty not to give them an aliyah as a form of coercion to push them to have a bris. So I'm not looking here at the question, can an oral have an aliyah or not? I'm seeing it from a different angle. You, as the rabbi of the community, and you've got here a non-circumcised child, you may have a degree of influence on the situation, and you have a duty to exploit that power of influence. There may be a situation where you don't have that power of influence, and therefore it may be in that case more justified to give them an aliyah despite the fact they haven't had a bris. So that really one has to weigh up carefully. But there is certainly, if you want to have sources, you can be able to quote chapter and verse. This person said, I can't give you an aliyah until you have a bris. Rabbi, where did it say so? So you may be able to produce sources. You have to be very careful, and I'm with this. Someone asked the Rebbe about giving an aliyah to people who are not sure that they keep Torah and mitzvahs properly. Okay? So the Rebbe's answer, I'm reading more or less translating from the Rebbe's letter. It depends on many details. It depends on the behavior, the conduct of the one who wishes to have the aliyah. It depends also on the people who are present there. It depends upon what impression they will get if you will give this person an aliyah. And therefore, the Rebbe kind of goes a little bit longer. You have to take a number of factors into the consideration whether to give an aliyah or not. You have to be careful. Sometimes you mustn't be the one who is, lowering the standards. If you come into a community where they have had a standard till now that they wouldn't give an aliyah, oh, we're Chabad and everything's okay, fine and dandy, it's okay. You have to be very careful about that, because you are there to promote Yiddishkeit, to preserve Yiddishkeit, certainly not to be seen as being the one who's easygoing about Yiddishkeit. So that's something which you have to be careful about. What will be the, and if necessary, perhaps you should get someone else to do the. At any rate, then the Rebbe says further in this letter that you have in a principle, Yumin Mekareves, or Smoil, etc. That someone who is not behaving properly, you should use your right hand to bring them close, and you need to reject, you should use your left hand. And then the Rebbe finishes off, this is the important point. Especially when it's not sure whether you have any reason and right to reject at all, even with the left hand. In other words, even to reject a little bit. Not every situation do you say, oh, treif, out. Sometimes people are, they don't deserve that rejection at all. And therefore one should be more patient. And now I had to contrast this, the following situation. A fellow became a Balshuva, brilliant fellow. He's a Levi, and his parents are not Shomer Shabbos. He became a Shomer Shabbos, went off to yeshiva possibly, and then he, at the age of 30, so several years later, he decided something about his gender, that he's one of these interesting situations, which is people's conjectures, and then he dropped Yiddishkeit, and he sent an email to half the community that he does not accept Torah Misinai, he doesn't believe in the Eibishter, the Creator, etc. But he still comes to Shul. He's a Levi, he comes Shabbos at Mincha, and he's the only Levi there as a Kohen. How do you handle such a situation? Now this is a different story. He is not like you can say he might have, I'm not sure where he stands. He has, in a very open way, said he rejects the foundations of Torah Sinai. So that becomes a much more difficult situation. Can you ignore that? Are you allowed to ignore that? You can say the person is making a cry for help, which is probably true. But at the same time, if a person has clearly declared that they have no faith in the principles of Yiddishkeit, it becomes a question: can you give them, can you count them as minion, etc. Pardon?
Can't you relate to a girl? Can't you relate to a girl?
No. Right. Okay, I realize you understood what I was alluding to. Right. Now, what about a man who's married to a non-Jewish woman? Married, living with a non-Jewish woman. So here, poskim, contemporary poskim, not talking about, poskim from 500 years ago, I'm talking about the poskim of the last century, this century. So they say that the person who lives with a non-Jewish woman has openly declared that he has no concern for his Yiddishkeit at all, and therefore he's like an Apikoros and you can't give him an aliyah. That may have been more true 30, 40 years ago. Unfortunately, intermarriage is much less unacceptable today than it was several decades ago. I don't know whether one could say today that the person who married a shiksa has rejected his Yiddishkeit totally. I'm not sure. I'm just telling you that the Apostle would take that position, and again, using the Rebbe's word, which I said before, it depends on the Roshim of the people around. Also, you have to take that very seriously, but also, he may not be deserving of the rejection. And there have been events where there's been a more lenient stance taken. Okay, we're closing to. I think I'll just share with you a couple more points, and then I said I'll leave you some time for questions. And, to keep my word also. Yeah. So now, when you design a shul, the correct place for a chazan is actually on the floor, or actually some places even lower. As is known, there's the Maral shul in the Altneu shul in Prague, where there's a well by the Omid, and the Omid is a bit lower. But most shuls we don't have it lower, but the idea of a chazan standing on the bimah in the more traditional shuls is not done. In the more modern shuls, where you have choirs and that type of setup, so then they would have the chazan performing from a bimah, but that is more the exception when we talk about the traditional. It's not Torah Sinai, like this and like this. Okay, but when we're talking about designing our shuls, I would like to say that a Chabad shul should be any Chabadnik should come in, should be able to feel that this is a Chabad shul, and not to say because I'm living in this in the community, therefore I have to make innovations which are not known in Chabad. Chabad shul, the bimah should be in the middle, and the chazan should be up front. Now, what about the bimah being in the middle? Now, this became a big issue about 150 years ago, where the Reform started making inroads into Yiddishkeit in Hungary, Germany. In Hungary, they used to call them the Neologen. It's a milder form of reform, and they wanted to design their shuls, temples. They were trying to compete, perhaps, with the churches. Should I say lahavdil? Should I not say lahavdil? The churches, the design of a church is that there is an altar, which is up front, and everything goes on. All the main happenings are in the front of the church. And so they wanted to also, they introduced that the bimah should be right up front, near the Yoren Kodesh. And they would have, I was once in a shul in Melbourne, where they had the bimah right up front, and there was a swivel. When it came to davening, so the chazan stood facing the Yoren Kodesh. When it came to Krias HaTorah, the swivel did the other way around. So then the bimah was, like the slope was the other direction, and he was reading, it was actually Purim, so he was reading the Megillah facing the congregation with his rear to the Yoren Kodesh. So the poskim at the time, as in Chassam Sofer, etc., took strong exception to this, and based upon the Rambam in Hilchos Tfilah, how it's based upon also the position of the Hakel, or the Mizbeach. Actually, they say an interesting thing. The Mizbeach is the equivalent of the bimah, or the bimah is the equivalent of the Mizbeach. And that is why when it comes to Sukkot, we take the Shabbos, or the Lulav, we go around the bimah in commemoration of the way they used to go around with the Arobis in the Beis HaMikdash around the Mizbeach. So just like the Mizbeach is centered in the yard of the Beis HaMikdash, so too the bimah should be centered in this shul. In the Beis HaMikdash, I'm sure you've learned about this, the Mizbeach was 32 amas. From the entrance until the Mizbeach was 22 amas. from the Mizbeach until the building of the Beis Hamikdash proper was again 22 amas. So it was centered from front to back. It was centered. It was off center for other reasons. At any rate, so the poskim used this as the precedent for the bima. The bima should be in the middle. There's a certain Rav today in New Jersey. He was applied for a job as a Rav, and one of the problems was that the bima was right up front. And by the way, about this shul in Melbourne, it's a beautiful, majestic shul, antique furniture. And Lubavitcher Rav became the Rav there, and they changed it. And they put the bima down in the middle. Somehow, I can't imagine how they agreed to this. All this furniture, which is over 100 and something years old, and they had to cut away and change the whole structure of the shul to put the bima in the middle, and he managed to wreck shul. You're an Aussie? You're from Melbourne? Okay. It's got the bib in the middle now, yeah? Yeah, me too. Okay. On the outside is a majestic building?
Yeah, very nice.
Way down to downtown you pass it, yeah? There's lakes. Okay. So, back to, so this rabbi to be, the rabbi had smicha, but the rabbi to be in the practical sense. So he asked the Rebbe about this, and the Rebbe said that they should introduce 1 or 2 rows of seats in front of the bima. So then he wrote back to the Rebbe, how about we should make a space for 1 or 2 seats, rows, but not actually have the chairs there. So the Rebbe wrote back to him that if so is a suffix, I'm not sure whether that will last. You have to understand how balabatim work. If you give a balabos a seat, this is my seat, and he's not going to move so quickly. It's going to be pretty permanent. Admei Avi Esri. So by having just space for a couple of rows of chairs, well, might be a little bit of progress here and there, and it will become no longer there. So the Rebbe has insisted that there should be actual seats in front of it, and the seats will be allocated. This is my understanding of the Rebbe said. Now what I want to explain to you is, that does not mean that the bima has to have seats in front. Actually, ideally, it would be better that the space in front of the bima should be an open space, like in 770. Someone asked the question, in 770 there are seats in front of the bima, and the upstairs shul there's not even space to put seats. The Rebbe did not say you have to have seats in front of the bima. The bima has to be in the middle. When the bima is up front, and you want to somehow make it kivyachal in the middle, so then by having some seats in front of it as well at the back, so then that's an apology kind of, and it makes it as if it's centered. It's not mamish at the edge, it becomes somewhat towards the center. But when you actually have the bima in the middle, so then you do not have to have seats in front. Some poskim objected to have seats in front, because when people say Baruch Hu, they bow, and they don't want them to be seen as bowing to the gentlemen who are sitting in front of the bima. So really, it's not an ideal situation. There's many shuls they have lack of space, so the poskim, the Maisa, are allowed to have seats. There's no need to have seats in front of the bima, unless the bima happens to be up front, then you have to have something to make a separation there. I think we're going to stop there and allow you some time for questions, if you want. Yes?
I came across something with a friend of mine, which I found a little disturbing, and so I wanted to ask exactly what that law is. I have a certain friend who he has a picture of a river. So whenever he has Machshavas Zoros, he looks at this picture while he davens, and he goes back to his davening. So I personally, I try not to look at it. I even have lessons in Tanya. I learned Tanya before davening, so I put a chumash over it, so there's not to be any pictures around. So is that like a problem? Is it not a problem?
It's a very good question. The question is, can you daven with a picture in front of you?
Yeah.
The answer is you're not allowed to daven with a picture in front of you. One advice which that person is using may be, for a moment, he stops davening, looks at the picture, then covers the picture again, and then continues davening, but not looking at the picture. I want to share with you something. That when I was, before my bar mitzvah, so my father-in-law became a father at the time I wasn't married. It was before Bar Mitzvah. So he was encouraging us to ask the Rebbe permission to start putting on Rabbeinu Tamuz Tefillin, which wasn't the done thing at the time. And so I pestered my father that when we go into Yechidus, ask the Rebbe permission for Rabbeinu Tamuz. So the Rebbe answered my father, he will undertake not to have Hesach Hadas, which means not to be distracted whilst he's doing this. That was his condition. Forbidden thoughts is out of the question, even Machshavas Rishus, which means optional, arbitrary things, also not. It's only 10 minutes. And the solution is, the advice given is to look into the Siddur for Shema V'Hoy Shemoya and Vaydaber V'Hoy Kiviyachol. And then the Rebbe asked if I have my own tefillin. And he asked my father, and he said no. So he said, wait till you have your own tefillin, and then you'll start doing it then. Fine. So it took another few months till my tefillin were ready. I started with Rabbeinu Tamuz, and I was not fulfilling the commission. And I felt very guilty about this. So a couple of years later, I went into the Rebbe, and I asked for bracha. Generally, there was this Yechidus after Tishrei, and I asked about, I feel very guilty about not keeping up the Rebbe's condition about Rabbeinu Tamuz. So I was hoping that he would say, you're such a nice boy, it's okay, let you go. That's what I was hoping. But that didn't happen. The Rebbe gave me a bracha. Then he says, that you're asking reference to that you asked about Rabbeinu Tamuz Tefillin. When a foreign thought will fall into your mind, you should raise your voice somewhat, and that will drive away the machshava. So you mentioned this, I just wanted to share that with you. It's another solution. Okay, next question. Yeah.
What's the proper way for a lady to wash the Kohanim's hands? Seems to be everywhere I go they do it.
I don't know, I've never there. I believe that the Levium first washed their own hands.
Yeah.
And then they washed the Kohanim's hands. So I don't know what's the...
In which way, how do they wash the Kohanim's hands?
Is it like Negel Vas or like Matil Shadayim for a meal?
Something like that, or is it just with a little bit of splash? Or just a big one like this?
Pass.
Okay.
So, what happens if someone's doing damage from that straight and you start to see for something else? And you can't raise your voice because you can't disturb the next person.
Okay, so you stop for a moment. You try to rebuild your concentration. You look inside. First of all, the first thing the Rebbe said was look inside the Siddur. One of the things which I've seen in Sfarim, how to address Machshavas which are very persistent, is to think of the shape of the four letters of Hashem's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei. Visualize in your mind the four letters of Yud Kei Vav Kei, and that will help clear away Machshavas. It's written in Sfarim, the whole Sfarim. Okay? Yes?
Can a kohen who's married to a grusha have a divorce?
The halacha, a kohen who's married to a grusha forfeits the privileges of kahuna, and therefore he cannot have a kohen. He may have another aliyah. However, I believe in England, the London Best Din, perhaps the Leeds Best Din follow that, is that they were to penalize a kohen not to give him any aliyah if he's married to a grusha. Max, they will give him, if he has a yortzeit, they will give him achron, something like that. But that is a lifnim yeshur sadin. I don't know whether it's lifnim or achron yeshur sadin, I don't know. But it's a thing which has been, it's a sanction which has been taken in England by the Best Din. It's not, it's beyond what's written in the Shulchan Aruch. Yeah.
Is it the Gabai's obligation to research the legitimacy and history of people getting the Aliyah, Kohen, Levi, Israel, or anybody? And if there's a question, is he still allowed to give on somebody's word?
I don't think you have to be as fussy and as concerned as a Rav who's Masada Kedushin. There's a very big difference. When you're Masada Kedushin, you have an absolute duty to verify the status of the person you're making a marriage with. It's something which is going to be bringing next generation, etc. You have to be very, very careful with that. Before you do process a marriage, you sit down with a questionnaire and you go through, you really make sure you get everything right. Krias HaTorah is a more of a one-off situation. if you don't know anything amiss, so I think you can rely on the information given to you. Once you start hearing rumours, etc., then I guess you do have a duty to sort things out. You don't want to continue a questionable situation. But I don't know whether your duty is certainly not as much as a role as selling edition. If you have it as a suffix, you can try to sort it out. You see what? Okay.
Is Colorado going to Marshall?
You okay? Okay, then I'm going to answer. I don't know. I wouldn't want to answer without looking at myself. There is a concept of people say about that tzaddikim wasn't tumah. There's been a lot of discussion, and I'll have to look that up inside. I remember, I believe in the Iskashros some years ago, there was an article about this. You can ask Rabbi Ginsburg in Homer. He'll probably be able to answer you practically.
This is sort of a personal question. When I was born, my parents gave me the name Alexander. My birth took place 13 years later, which they gave me the name Shimon. So now I go by the name Shimon and I say my father's name. Should I include the name Alexander in my name also?
Were you known as Alexander?
Yeah. Well, nobody really called me like Alexander. People called me like the Sasha, which is also in the Russian.
No, Sasha is short for Alexander.
Right. So there's people have, up until I think religious people.
I would think you should use both names.
In which order?
Don't think you have to use fussy. Whichever you choose. Because you can, you see, why am I not so fussy about that? You can choose to add a name, and you can choose to add that name before or after the current name. When Mizolish Wissen, you have to add a name because someone's not well, then one adds a name usually before the current name. But otherwise, if you want to add a name, sometimes there's a situation for a shidduch, for example, doesn't do a shidduch, the son-in-law, the same name as the father-in-law, or two mechutanim should not have the same name, two mechutenesses shouldn't have the same name. So these are things which one of them would add a name, but add a name after or before doesn't really matter. Yes.
Also, personal question. My father is a secular Jew, and his Hebrew name, as far as I know it, according to him and my aunt, is Era Isaac. And as I understand it, Era, because he was named after his two uncles, Ira and Yitzhak, or Isaac, Ira and Isaac. And Era is, as I understand, a Babylonian. It's not a Jewish name.
Era?
Yeah, Era. Yeah. And so when I go to, I've asked a couple different rabbis, what should I, call myself, when I get called up for Aliyah. And I go, but his middle name is David. It's Richard David. And his middle name is David, so I go by David. Because I know that's his name. Whereas with the bris, with his actual Hebrew name, there was some doubt as to what it actually was at first. And then, finally I got both him and my aunt to agree on what it was, saying it's Era Yitzhak. I don't know if it's not really his name.
I didn't manage to
Should
follow.
I go by Era Yitzhak?
When your bris, what name was given?
I don't know.
So what?
No, I'm asking my father's. Should I go by Ben?
So what was his name? You
Should I
don't
go by
know.
Ben David or Ben or
Is he known today as David?
No, he's not. His first name is Richard.
And does he ever go to shul? Okay. And he was known as Era Yitzchak.
When he had his first.
So use the name Era Yitzchak. You're going to add David also. Okay. Why do you put David to your father? I didn't get that.
His middle name is David.
In his Goyish name.
His name is Richard David. His name is Richard David.
Yeah, but his Yiddish name was Era Yitzchak.
Right.
So keep it. Era is the name. You said Era. There's a name in Tanakh. Era. Ayin Yud Reish Aleph, if I'm not mistaken. Was one of the people, I think, one of the counselors or one of the friends of David HaMelech.
There you go.
Yeah.
once saw this take place in the Ari's mikveh spot. I once saw somebody come with a water bottle and put that by where the water flows into the mikveh, and therefore maybe temporarily stop water from flowing into the mikveh, or maybe obscure water from flowing into the mikveh momentarily. What is the status of the mikveh if somebody's doing tefillah there? Is the mikveh something happen?
Hang on, nothing to do with this.
What do you mean?
It's got nothing to do with the topic which we discussed today. All right. So you take water in a container. That water is disqualified from mikveh. Yeah. What you got here is, I'm sure they did not stop all the water. Few points. First of all, you already have there a mikveh of more than 40 saw. The Rizal's mikveh is well over this year. And therefore, you could pour in buckets of water and dedicate till tomorrow. This will be kosher. So there's no question on that. Additionally, he did not stop the entire flow because he took some, but he didn't stop the rest of the flow. So it doesn't disqualify.
If you would have stopped the flow momentarily,
It'll still be kosher. Because the mikveh is water which came in a kosher manner.
yeah.
So that does not get disqualified by stopping the flow. Yes?
Same case you for his father. All first by his grandfather's name. His all of his grandfather. So you think twice?
I missed it.
His call up his grandfather's name is his own name. You call him like Abraham ben Abraham or something?
That's a very interesting question, because in my research about this business about using the grandfather's name, so I saw in a sefer which talks about Suba, and he says that you should actually say Moshe ben Moshe. Or Yaakov, there's a Gemara in Eruvin which I just saw recently. Yaakov bro de Bas Yaakov. His maternal grandfather was Yaakov. So here I saw a bit of a contradiction. Here you're saying you should say Abi Yosef ben Yitzchar. It was once Ben. And here I see the poskim are saying you should use a double Ben, or Ben Bas. And the answer might be that in the two instances where I saw the double Ben, it was when the grandfather and the grandson had the same name. And since it's not usual to have, unless there's a tragedy, it's not usual to have a child with the same name as the father, then perhaps that's why they threw in to use the Ben.
Can you give an idea to someone who's homosexual, keeps Shabbos and mitzvahs, but just has a desire for something else?
I don't know what that means exactly, what they're doing, but when they come to shul,
they keep Shabbos. The people who are from it's a very difficult thing to say, like a person who's from but does has that.
people do have areas out of the shul. We don't usually, unless they are declaring that they don't believe in Torah in Sinai. In other words, let's answer this clearly. If they're not violating, you give them the decree. Yeah, they're not violating, they're not denying Torah is Hashem. So the fact they've got time, so if a person eats hamburgers before or after, I remember I was once in a shul somewhere in Ashlichus, someplace, and so after the shul, people were in a local restaurant, they were being like Torahs around the table. It was a downtown nice restaurant. So a person who that's actually worse of it because you get the Michal Shabbos in public, yeah. But generally, if a person doesn't have area, even on a regular basis, it doesn't disqualify as something else.
Is there any source for a family of Gerim to have the name of the parents or something like that to go to the children, or say to like the whole family's name Gerim after the children are born, the parents and the children? Additionally, should they being called for Aliyahs not be the father's deceiving the son or something like that, as it would be with naturally born?
Right. You're asking because a ger is considered like a newborn in any family, so when a father and his son are converting at the same time, can the child have an aliyah with his father's name biological father should just have to be Ben Avraham.
Yeah.
But it would be preferable to use the Ben Avraham. But there are poskim who would allow, if necessary, to use like even an adoptive situation. Sometimes they will allow the one who adopted him to the child to have their adopted father's name. But really, I'd have to look that over the side because there are different opinions about that.
Yes. If you forget to daven mincha the day before Rosh Chodesh and you don't daven married twice, do you say daven over?
Absolutely, I've said twice. Yeah. What happens if you forgot your Alviyavia and mincha on Rosh Chodesh? So you have to daven married twice. So if you forgot the Alviyavia, you have to repeat the Shemona Esrei. But you only realize your mistake. You only realized after by Ma'ariv. Oh, you forgot to say Alviyavia Mincha after there another Shemona Esrei. And what will you do in the next Shemona Esrei? You won't say Alviyavia. So does it make sense to say another Shemona Esrei without a Alviyavia to rectify having missed the Alviyavia and Mincha?
No?
So the question is, the question boils down to, is it Shemona Esrei without the Alviyavia a non-Shemona Esrei, or is it a Shemona Esrei missing the Alviyavia? So here's two opinions in Shemona. Al-Rebbe in Shemona brings both opinions, and he, as far as I remember, he says you do not repeat the Shemona Esrei. You rely that the Shemona Esrei is the Shemona Esrei. Nothing wrong with it. All right, but since you're not going to achieve anything by repeating, so you may as well leave the way it is. Yes.
Yeah, when is somebody, if somebody's in the, if somebody's in
By the way, before I finish, I want to have a smicha for you guys.
no, if somebody's in a car accident and they want to, if somebody's in a car accident or another situation of this sort and they want to say Krias HaTorah, the Torah, is that done or is that not?
The person.
Yeah.
If a person had a road accident and came out safely.
They say, okay,
Sure.
but isn't Krias HaTorah only said under certain circumstances of the person?
4 cases.
Yeah, the 4 cases.
So the Alter Rebbe, in the Alter Rebbe Siddur, you have Krias HaTorah. So he says there that the minig, at least the minig Ashkenazis, that also things which are also dangerous situations, not necessarily those 4, we also say the bracha. It looks like there are poskim who insist it's those 4 and none others, but the Ashkenazi tradition is that any sapona, clear sapona, would say bracha. Just tell me how long I have to go, yeah? We have over time. 2 more questions, then we'll map some for lunch. Yeah.
If there was a dangerous situation but nothing actually ended up happening to you, do you still say
That's a very good question, yeah. I mean, it depends how involved you were, yeah. If you were, when there was an explosion in King Cross Station and you just happened not to be at the station at the time, so you wouldn't say Krias HaTorah. Or even let's say, and that was actually seriously speaking, there was a fellow who used to take that train every single day, and he, for whatever reason, did not get to the train that day, early or later, whatever. So he would not say Krias HaTorah. He wasn't involved. But when he was actually in a life-threatening situation, then he would say Krias HaTorah.
Well, for example, I was chased by a cow with giant horns, and I jumped the fence about a foot or 2 before it actually got to me. Is that a case to say?
I would think so.
Calling somebody up to Krias HaTorah, is it necessary to call them also by their title, if they're a rabbi, or a Talmud, or all the time?
Okay. I'll digress and come back to this. When it comes to writing on a stone, person's not safe. So the Rebbe writes that one should be conscious of what's the done thing in that environment. Not to overdo it, not also to do less than what is accepted in that environment. So really, I didn't borrow from that the same thing over here. start going all elaborate titles, that's not a done thing, would not be right. At the same time, if it is accepted to give a title, or Morenu Hora, whatever it may be, if that's the accepted thing and you don't do that, that might be actually a bit disrespectful to the person you're following up. So it depends on what is the accepted norm. So you'd have to establish that before answering that question. Okay, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.